Tight squeeze. Dean Charles Ing. He knew the theory of repairing the gizmo all right. He had that nicely taped. But there was the little matter of threading a wire through a too small hole while under 0G, and working in a space suit. MacNamara ambled across the loading ramp, savoring the dry, dusty air that smelled unmistakable of spaceship. He half-consciously separated the odors, the sweet, volatile scent of fuel, the sharp aroma of lingering exhaust gases from early morning test firing, the delicate odor of silicon plastic which was being stowed as payload. He shielded his eyes against the sun, watching as men struggled with the last plastic girders to be strapped down, high above the dazzling ground of white sands. The slender cargo doors stood open around Valier's girth, awaiting his own personal okay. This flight would be the fourth for Major Edward MacNamara. As he neared the great, squatting shock absorbers, he could feel the tension begin to knot his stomach. He had, of course, been overwhelmed by the opportunity to participate in Operation Doughnut. The fact that he had been one of the best mechanical engineers in the Air Force never occurred to him at the time. He was a pilot, and a good one, but he had languished as C.O. of a maintenance squadron for nearly 2 years before he was given another crack at glory. Now, he wasn't at all sure he was happy with the transition. They needed master mechanics for Operation Doughnut, but he felt they should be left on the ground when the towering supply rockets lifted. He stopped, leaning against scaffolding as he saw a familiar figure turn toward him. He cupped his hands before his face. "Hey, douse that butt. Can't you, oh, Mac?" The commanding voice trailed off in a chuckle. Better to clown his way through the inspection, MacNamara thought, than to let Ruiz notice his nervousness. The co-pilot, Ruiz, walked toward him, still smiling. "One of these days, boy, you gonna go too far. Thought you were a real, 18-carat saboteur." He clapped MacNamara on the shoulder and gazed aloft. "Good day for it? No weather, no hangover, no nothing. Yeah. You know, Johnny, I been thinking about a modification for our breathing oxy." He sniffed appreciatively. "What's that?" "Put a little dust in it, a few smells. That stuff we breathe is just too sanitary." "I know what you mean. I sure begin to crave this filthy, germ-filled air after a few hours out there." They both smiled at the thought, then turned to the business at hand. "By the way, Johnny, what are you doing out so early? Didn't expect to see you cabbies before 10. "I don," the bronzed Ruiz replied. "Went to bed early, woke up at 6. And couldn't drop off again. And here I am. Carl ought to be along around 9:30. Thought I'd help you pre-flight, if you want me to. Sure. He wanted nothing of the sort, but had the tact not to say so. Edward MacNamara was as familiar with the failure as he was with the tip of his nose. He had been on the scene when Dan Burke test-hopped the third stage, had made improvements and rerouting jobs, and had memorized every serial number of every bearing that went into failure. As flight engineer, he was supposed to, with Johnny Ruiz helping a little and hindering a little, he finished his tour of the cargo sections and grinned his approval to a muscular loading technician. They can button her up, Sergeant. I couldn't do a better job myself. It was a compliment of the highest order, and they both knew it. Riding the tiny lift down to ground level, MacNamara stopped them every 10 feet or so to circle the catwalks. He noticed Ruiz's impatience about halfway down. No hurry, Johnny. I don't want another wild on our hands. He knew he shouldn't have said it, but it slipped out anyway. Everyone tried to forget the wild disaster, particularly the flight personnel. The Wild, one of the first ships to be built, had made only 2 orbits before being destroyed. Observers stated that a cargo hatch had somehow swung open when the Wild was only 1,000 feet in the air. At any rate, the pilot reported damage to one second stage fin and tried to break his way down. The Wild settled beautifully, tilted, then fell headlong. The resultant explosion caused such destruction that, had there not been a number of men in orbit and waiting for supplies, the project might have been halted. Temporarily, it was generally conceded that a more thorough pre-flight could have prevented the Wild's immolation. Ruiz was noticeably quieter during the remainder of the inspection. The external check completed, MacNamara strapped a small flashlight to his wrist and began the internal inspection, jokingly called the autopsy. An hour and over 150 feet later, MacNamara wheezed as he swung over the bulkhead at the base of Valier's third and top stage. His aching limbs persuaded him to take a breather. After all, his complete inspection of the day before really made a final pre-flight unnecessary, and passing near the frigid oxygen tanks was a day's work in itself. He listened to the innumerable noises around and below him. The clicks and hums near him meant that Ruiz, having given up following him, was checking out the flight controls, with power on only in the top stage. From below came a vibrational rushing noise, nearly subsonic, which told him of the fueling operation. He thought of the electrical relays governing the fuel input and shuddered. He violently disliked the idea of having hot wires near fuel of any kind, and rocket fuel in particular. MacNamara swept his light over his wristwatch. 15 after. Logan should be along soon, he thought, and hastened to finish checking the conduits, servos, pumps and hydraulic actuators below the cabin level. This done, he crawled up the final ladder to the cabin, or dome. "Well," cried a cheerful voice, "if it isn't our grimy Irishman." MacNamara shook the sweat from his brow and muttered, "Irishman, is it? How about Logan? That's a good Scandinavian name." "How about Logan? He's great, as usual. Just look at me, Mac. What a specimen." Logan, the inevitable optimist, bounced out of his acceleration couch and spread his arms wide as if to show the world what a superman he, Carl Logan, was. The gesture and its intimations made MacNamara smile. Logan wasn't much over 5 feet tall, and his flight suit made him look like a bald pussycat. His small physique covered a fantastic set of reflexes, however, and Logan's sense of humor was a quality of utmost importance. He hadn't an enemy in the world. His enemy was out of this world by definition. Logan wanted to conquer space and, so far, was doing just that. O.K. Okay, laugh. Just remember this, Gargantua, I may not be tall, but I sure am skinny. MacNamara smiled again, nodding agreement. Well, don't everybody talk at once. How is she, Mac? With luck, answered MacNamara, we might get 10 feet off the turf. He paused for effect. Seriously, Carl, she never looked better. You could take her up right now. Say, where's Johnny? I thought you'd just be checking into the medics. Looks like everybody's early today. He's probably over in some corner, making out his will. He was down below a while ago with a face a mile long. Probably, thought Mac, he's still thinking about the wild. Why did I have to bring that up aloud? He said, I ought to check the ground crew. Did you bring the forms? Nope. Just my magnificent self. If anything had gone astray, they'd have told you. All the same, I think I'll go down and question the troops. Don't leave without me. He clambered out onto the catwalk, leaving the airlock open. The sun was riding higher every minute. In a little over an hour, he'd be 1,000 miles away vertically. The knot in his stomach began to form again. He wasn't scared, exactly, he kept telling himself. Excited was a nicer word. The inspection forms signed, Mac held a short interrogation with the crew.
Thanks for being a part of Chronicles Corner. I hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for future updates. Goodbye.